The Kansas City Chiefs are on the clock at pick 133. What's up, everybody? Kent Swanson here with Matthew Lane. Joshua Briscoe also hanging out with us today. Tucker Franklin behind the camera. We are anticipating the Kansas City Chiefs' next selection in this draft. They do not trade up. They do not make any moves. They stand pat, and they're sitting at 133 with a board I think that is pretty favorable to them at this point.
Yeah, and we probably get through the preamble pretty quick. I mean, these picks come in fast, right? So, we're sitting here. We like the board the Chiefs are looking at. Day 3 so far has been a lot of running backs, a lot of linebackers. I think we don't know if we love a linebacker pick for the Chiefs here, but there's some running backs on the board that are amazing. We got Damian Martinez, Devin Neal, DJ Giddens. We got some guys that are up here that we would like at the running back spot.
Absolutely. And the Bears picked linebacker Ruben Hypolite from Maryland, a guy that's been getting a lot of buzz. Lately.
Are you sure?
With some athletic testing.
You're good. No, not them. I was talking to Ken if he was sure about that.
The Kansas City Chiefs are on the clock.
They are. Yes, they are on the clock.
So we'll see what they have. So I don't know. What do you think here? You said running back would be a position that has some value here. I mean, I honestly think there's several positions that I would be happy with. I do think I lean offensive side of the ball just because of how many investments that they made on day 2 on defense, all defense. So I would prefer to see it on the offensive side of the ball. When they were talking last night at their press conferences, they said we like the market at running back. We like the board for running back and receiver. So both of those positions, you've seen some running backs and receivers kind of go off the board. I think there's some varieties of flavors here for different players at the spots, but I think the board sits pretty for running back and wide receiver. I would like to see one of those positions addressed.
Sure. We talked about some of the running backs that we would like. And then now, if we were going to look at the wide receiver position, Alec Aomaner, wide receiver out of Stanford, still available. Torrey Horton, wide receiver out of Colorado State. And I know Jaylen Royals out of Utah State also has some fans. Like, there's offensive weapons that are available out there that we would all like the Chiefs to go. I think we don't even have the pick is not even in yet. So the Chiefs are deciding or maybe working the phones a little bit. So we will see what happens. But there's some options. Are there any defensive players that would tickle your fancy? I know for those, during the live show, we talked about it. I talked about some of mine. Are there any that would work for you?
Well, Braden Swinson just continuing to add edge rushers. Like, I think down at this point, that's a good one. I really like Joshua Farmer, the defensive tackle. The
pick is official.
Pick is in for the Kansas City Chiefs. Joshua Farmer, the defensive tackle out of Florida State. That would be another one I'd like. Some of my favorite linebackers came off the board too. So I don't know if I'm really excited about any of the options at linebacker relative to some of the options that you see on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah. So now we're just kind of waiting to find where the pick is or to see when it gets announced. And we're trying to find out here. We're looking, I think we're all scooting and looking around.
Offense or defense, call your shot.
I think it's going to be an offensive player.
I do too.
Offensive weapon.
I think they're going offensive player. I think they're going to go with somebody that, puts points on the board.
All right, go position. Briscoe, what position they taking?
Running back.
Maddie.
Yeah, I think it'll be running back too.
I'm afraid of what happens to the board between this pick and their next one, right?
You know what? No, yeah, I think it'll be running back, but I'm hoping for wide receiver. And not that I dislike the running backs, I think you might be able to get somebody in the next pick at running back and wide receiver. I think you are going to run out of players quicker.
I was going to ask you guys that exact question of where's the pocket of this pick and presumably the next one.
From what we've been talking about, right? Like, I think there might be a few more running backs that you feel okay with going later, although they've been flying off the board. Whereas wide receiver, it's a hard 3-man race left right now for me with the guys we talked about, the Aomaner, Horton, and Royals. So after those 3, I think it's a bigger cliff than you see at running back probably.
I'd be happy about it.
There's 31 picks until the Chiefs' next selection. So that's where things get a little bit tricky here too, right? Is like you're going to have a long time until they're picking again. So, capital as far as being able to move up, all you have left is 7th round picks. So that may not be able to get you as high as you want or high up enough. So that's just another thing to kind of take into consideration as they're navigating the board. It is interesting to see the Chiefs show so much restraint, not trading up.
Yeah, they're just letting this board fall to them. They traded back in the first round. They've just kind of been letting everything else. Besides the Noel Williams pick earlier on day 2, they did trade up for it. And I think that's probably where they found a cliff that they wanted to make sure that they got in on. But besides that, they've just been letting the board fall to them. I am surprised they've been kind of keeping so many mid to late day 3 picks in this particular draft. But, we'll see. The board, we've said the board looks pretty good for them right now. So we are just very impatiently waiting this pick to be announced for the Chiefs.
It is kind of interesting, how the
okay, we're coming out. The board's
it's slowed down so much that you kind of wonder, like, there's like a hint of me that wonders if this is Shedeur Sanders because the pick hasn't leaked and like they're kind of, it's been pretty tight here, but I would be very surprised if that was legit.
It is currently being announced.
Ooh,
Jalen, okay.
Jaylen Royals is the Kansas City Chief. I think this is a tremendous talent.
Yes.
This is a player that we've talked a little bit about here during this weekend. I think he was a player that should have heard his name called on day 2 from a talent perspective. An incredible player with the ball out, with the ball in his hands. This is a value pick if you're asking me. I think this is a really nice little selection here at the end of the 4th round.
Yeah, this is a player that a lot of people had ranked a lot higher than this. If you go through everyone's rankings, including us with the KCSN Draft Guide, like he's a player that a lot of people liked, and 6 foot tall, just over 200-pound wide receiver who played predominantly on the outside at Utah State, which is something that the Chiefs need. He's made dynamic plays for Utah State over the years. You can see him, if you're watching the national broadcast right now, they're showing some of his plays downfield. You're going to get some plays of him winning after the catch. So he does a lot of the stuff I think that the Chiefs look for at the position, and there's going to be an adjustment as you go from his college offense to what the Chiefs have, but they might not need him to play right away given the wide receiver room does have talent across it right now.
So Matty Lane, you gave us some thresholds of some players that normally eat up a lot of snaps at the receiver position. It's over 6 feet or 6 feet or over.
Yes.
Over 205 pounds.
Pretty much. The smallest guy that has been this X-style wide receiver that has eaten the most snaps for the Chiefs year over year has been, I believe, 6 foot, 205 pounds is the bare minimum.
So he's 6 foot, 205 pounds.
Correct.
In round 4, at the end of round 4, the Chiefs are getting our wide receiver 6 in the KCSN Draft Guide.
Woo.
Our evaluator for him, Jake Stack, massive Jaylen Royals fan, put a second-round grade, a low second-round grade on him. And he's wide receiver 6 in the KCSN Draft Guide. And, we talked a little bit about him earlier. Like, we talked about the frame. The frame seems to be somebody that could hold up as an X-type receiver. And I think, actually, this is one of the interesting things when we were talking about, like, your pure X earlier this offseason in the last month. We brought that up as something to discuss on the lab, looking at, what this team likes, what this team typically has. I don't know if he's like the truest of X's, like we've talked a little bit about earlier. I think there's some question marks about like how he is as a true X, and if he's going to fit that profile. But he might be the Andy Reid version of an X in 2025, right? Where you've got a guy that can line up a variety of spots on the field. He can line up in the slot. He can line up outside. As much as the Chiefs like to play from condensed looks, as much as the Chiefs like to move their receivers around, they Y-ISO with their tight end and all these things. This is a guy that can move around and has some versatility to play X, F, and Z. So like maybe this is a hint towards that direction as well.
Yeah, no, it absolutely could be. This is definitely not a guy that I think you pencil in as a traditional X wide receiver, even for what the Chiefs traditionally do at the end. Like this isn't an MVS or a Justin Watson type of player. This is a guy who honestly profiles a lot closer to Rashee Rice. I mean, that's what his profile in college, I think even what his athletic profile, his usage profile kind of looks like, is a guy that the safe bet is getting the ball in his hands and letting him run after contact. He's physical. He can be physical at times. He can make some plays downfield, but he hasn't been the biggest separator when he's talking about downfield stuff, even against a lower level of competition. So you're going to ease him into this. He has the size profile that it checks the boxes the Chiefs like. So if they get him to buy in on blocking, to live in that physical world, he might be able to eat some snaps there on the outside. Or worst case scenario, maybe they want somebody just in case Rashee Rice's knee does take a little bit of time to get back. Maybe they want somebody that has some pop, some explosion after the catch. It's not just a Juju Smith-Schuster who's more of a possession guy at this point in his career that can provide some of that juice. So I'm kind of intrigued to see how the Chiefs try to use him. This is a guy that none of us anticipated Rashee Rice going from pure outside wide receiver to a slot wide receiver for the Chiefs in that college to NFL transition. Does Jaylen Royals go through that same thing, or do they see a guy that they think can live on the outside? It's going to be fascinating to see what their plans for him are going forward.
Right, and that was one of the questions when we were, to a degree, discussing someone like a Luther Burden early in the draft, like just a tremendous talent and a player like that. Is like there's two things here. Like maybe they aren't as beholden to that X role in its in its purest form, the way you've historically seen it with a Dwayne Bowe. Like we talked about Trey Harris in round 2 is, hey, he's going to be a guy that's going to, be a big frame guy that you can throw slants to. He can catch the ball. He can, absorb the contact that he's going to, take going over to the middle of the field. And is that what they covet? And instead, they grab a guy that has the size, has the frame to play a little bit out there. But maybe it's what we talked about is if there's one staff that could probably figure out how to utilize and exploit the strengths of this skill set of this receiver room now, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. So maybe it's a committee approach to playing that X role a little bit, right? Like you're moving these guys and you're moving pieces and parts around. It's a little bit of Rasheed. It's a little bit of Royals. It's a little bit of everybody kind of playing that role and just kind of moving around a little bit. That could be the path that we see this team taking with that receiver spot. Now, Josh Briscoe, you look like you got something in here.
Let's go.
Just something that I think Kent's going to be really mad he didn't get to first.
Uh-oh.
The Kansas City Royals. It was written in the stars. It's perfect. It's his last name, guys. It's his last name, Royals.
Yeah.
There's a baseball team here.
I get it.
That plays. You're going to slow play that pun? You?
It's because I didn't think of it.
I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited about the double dip of my guy and the draft guide. I'm excited about finding the value. I feel like all of the weird vibes of the last 48 hours are getting refreshed a little bit because the Chiefs found great value at a premium position. I'm jacked.
Yeah, I watched him too. And I let me see where I put my grade when I did my cross on Royals. We both gave Royals. Me and Matthew both gave Royals a high 3rd round grade.
So very happy
when you're talking about from us, this one makes a ton of sense from the ability, the Chiefs love to get these guys after the catch. They like the manufactured touches. They like the manufactured touches to be able to come from anywhere. So you have that baked in a little bit here more now. There's definitely some work to be done about how they fit all these guys. But at this point in the draft, I think it's a slam dunk to be able to get a guy with this kind of ability.
One other thing that I mentioned on Only Weird Games last week that's really weird. It's going to sound wrong. Rasheed Rice has 2 years left on his contract.
What? Yeah, it's true. And he might be suspended for part of it.
He might be suspended for part of it. We haven't seen him back from that traumatic knee injury. So, listen, man, if you can get redundancies with players like Rasheed Rice, I'm willing to take that. In the 4th round, no less.
Right, and that's ultimately where it comes down to. We don't know exactly how the Chiefs are going to use him right now. They've proven, multiple times now that they will take a guy in college and maybe use him in a different way than he was used at his previous stop. So we'll have to see how he's used, but at the bare minimum, you get a little bit of a safety net in terms of creating this explosive physical yards after catch profile that Royals has that shares with Rasheed Rice if he is unable to be 100% healthy early on this year coming off that knee injury. And then in the future, hey, maybe the contract negotiations don't work. Maybe Rasheed Rice and the Chiefs don't end up being a long-term thing that they got going on. And now you have a guy that could potentially be that replacement and put you kind of ahead of that ball. So I get the pick. I fully understand the pick. And I think it's a pretty good pick. It's a good value. We've been talking about a lot of the consensus boards. We got to scroll back. We got to go find where this is, but this might be one of the Chiefs' bigger bits of value that they got here by going with Royals here. He is 74th overall on the consensus board, so that's a pretty big bonus.
It's not just us that's high on him, right? We gave him a high 3rd in our personal grades. We gave him a high 3rd in the KCSN draft guide. He even got elevated a little bit above that as a 2nd round grade. This is 2 straight years that the Chiefs have selected someone we had in the KC Sports Network draft guide as a 2nd round grade at pick 133. Last year at pick 133, the Chiefs took Jaden Hicks, a player we had a 2nd round grade on. This year, the Chiefs take another 2nd round grade in the KCSN draft guide with Jaylen Royals at pick 133 too. I think this is tremendous value at this point in the draft. And even if there is some things to figure out, the talent, we talked about you wanted to get him a playmaker, an offensive weapon. You wanted to get another offensive weapon into the mix. This is an offensive weapon that can give you something in 2024 or 2025. This is a player that has the ability to provide some value in 2025.
You think he's hitting the ground running a little bit?
I think that there will be a package of plays for Jaylen Royals. I think he'll be a package player in 2025, most likely but it gives you some insulation for Rasheed Rice, and it gives you some versatility, a guy that can line up all over the place, which if you've listened to the Chiefs the last few years, they've mentioned this several times. They like their receivers to be able to play every single position. They like to have the X, F, and the Z. They want them to be able to do that. They want them to be able to know all those positions. This is a guy that kind of is flexible in that regard where I think you could do a little bit more.
So I'm going to throw a little. Oh, look, Alec Ayomanor just went off the board too. I'm going to throw a little bit of cold water on this just because I don't think, and this isn't a bad thing about the player. I think that he might be more of a 2026 kind of impact guy, Jaylen Royals, just because he played almost all of his snaps on the left-hand side as the outside wide receiver. Guys that do that usually have a very slow transition at all to the NFL because they have to learn not only how to play other wide receiver positions, but they have to learn how to run routes from both sides of the field. He hasn't had to do that so far in college. And then if you go and look kind of like looking at Matt Harmon's reception perception grades, or even if you can find other stats coming out, he struggled against press coverage, right? So if you're struggling against press coverage, you're average-ish versus zone coverage, there might be a little bit of a learning curve in the NFL. And this is in no way, shape, or form saying this is a bad pick or it won't work out. It's just I think he might be a guy that needs a little bit more of a runway before he's able to hit the ground running. I would have said all the exact same stuff about Rashee Rice, to be fair, coming out. And it did not take him that long to figure it out, right? So that's always something to put in the back pocket. I just think if you look at the profile and where the production came, he might be a guy that needs a little bit of time before he works in. And that's okay. The Chiefs are in a position to use that. So maybe it's just like you said, like Jaden Hicks value last year. Chiefs didn't really get him unlocked until later in the year. And then it was his year 2 where we're expecting a huge jump from him. Maybe Royals is the same thing, right? Maybe it's a little bit later this year where he starts to have an impact on offense. And then next year is where you would really expect him to take that jump.
I think this is the most impactful receiver that the Chiefs could have taken at 133, though. As far as I think he's the best talent that the Chiefs could have possibly grabbed at pick 133 from the receiver perspective.
Okay.
And hey, there's 31 picks until the running back spot could potentially be addressed. And there's still a market there. There's still plenty of players available at that spot. But yeah, Jaylen Royals going to the Chiefs at pick 133. Are we good to grade? You think we're good to grade? So let's give this pick a grade. And I do want Joshua Briscoe to grade this pick as well.
Have him go first.
Yeah, he's absolutely going first.
A-.
A-.
I don't know if you could do a whole lot more with a fourth round pick to move me much over that without seeing this man play NFL football.
A late fourth, by the way.
But my immediate reaction is they addressed an ever-present position of need. Every team always needs more wide receivers that they can bring up, build around, and have for the long haul. We've seen the Chiefs, even with the highly drafted rookies who have had a bigger role later in their rookie year, that takes 8 weeks, 10 weeks before those guys are even really getting a larger role here. Obviously, Royals, you expect to have a longer runway, but I'm pretty excited about this.
Matty.
Me, I'll give it a B+. I'll give it a B+. I think there was a couple other wide receivers that I might have personally preferred and how they would fit in earlier on with the Chiefs, but I do think Jaylen Royals' ultimate upside is as high, if not higher, than any of those other guys. And we are talking about a guy, again, that we had graded as an early to mid third round pick between me and you, and they get him in the middle to the back end of the fourth round, plus value. You get a guy that I think has a high upside in the NFL who fits a prototype that the Chiefs know how to use. They know how to make this work. They've done it time and time again with Andy Reid. So you really like the upside. It might be a little bit of a slower process to get him integrated, but I do think they will figure out how to make him a player that matters for them in the future.
I think they'll find a way to utilize and exploit his strengths immediately because that is a trend that you see with this team. So I do think you're going to get some immediate contribution from him, not in a big role, but in a limited capacity, kind of similar that we saw with Rashee Rice. So I think this is a guy that has the juice and the ability after the catch to make some plays for you in 2025. And I do think he is a guy that you are excited to have. If there's one team I trust to make all of these pieces work when it comes to offense and finding a way to just maximize the strengths of a player, it's the Kansas City Chiefs and Andy Reid. Oh, and that Patrick Mahomes guy. It's an A pick for me. The Kansas City Chiefs get plus value with their first pick in day 3 of the NFL draft. Pick 133 is Jaylen Royals, the wide receiver out of Utah State.